I mean, the fandom was huge. And, that's not even getting to the ticket prices and what people were willing to pay in the secondary market. So if you look at something that made that much money and that was that successful, why wouldn't the movie be at least that successful? I mean, I blanched at taking my teenage daughter when the show came to town because 2 tickets would have cost $3,600. And those were not good seats. I mean, 2 tickets in the nosebleed would have cost $3,600. So if I can spend, $20 on tickets, another 20 on popcorn, and see it in an IMAX or something, I'm in.
You bet.
Many times.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, October 13th. It's Friday the 13th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in Silicon Valley. My name is Mike Malone. If the setting looks unusual, I'm up for another day in Oregon, and I'll be back next week. And I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman of NBC Bay Area, who is in Silicon Valley. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove. And our host is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, so Scott, obviously the major story of this week that kind of overwhelmed everything was the situation in the Gaza. And it has enormous long-term implications for international trade, for technology development, all sorts of things that we can't really predict yet. So we're going to go to the other stories, and we'll cover that as the events over there as they unfold and as they impact the world. So let's begin with European Union. European Union likes to get in the midst of all this stuff, and this actually relates to the situation in Israel. A top EU official, a guy named Thierry Breton, sent out letters to all the top social media executives, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and Shuzi Chu of TikTok, over the flood of misinformation on their platforms related to the Israel-Hamas war, warning that EU laws can impose severe financial penalties if the spread of falsehoods goes unchecked. And apparently, these are major fines. It can represent as much as it's several percent of these companies' annual revenues, up to 6%, which means that Meta could have to pay a multi-billion-dollar penalty, and X and TikTok would have to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in penalties. What is this guy trying to do? I mean, obviously, as you mentioned to me, there's just a flood of misinformation, deep fake videos, false reports, everything else on these sites right now. What is he expecting them to do?
Well, I think what he is doing and what a lot of American officials are asking about is why these sites have so quickly turned inaccurate and therefore dangerous. This could have been a really big positive test. And I hate to use the word positive with which, what's going on in the Middle East, but for these social networks, they were known up until about, 10 days ago as the place to get news. And they made old school media, like where I work, look old school and old and slow and behind the times. And forget about newspapers. My goodness, that's a whole nother day late. And because of moves like Elon Musk getting rid of the people who looked for misinformation on Twitter, and we know that Facebook has stressed sort of engagement over accuracy. These sites are now world famous for misinformation, and that's their reputation. And it's turned quickly, and it's turned in a very bad way. And it's a shame. These sites really were go-to sites, and I think they will be in the future. But right now, the reputation is if I go online, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole, and probably 7 out of the 10 things that I see are going to be wrong. And that's the death knell for any organization that wants to be known as a go-to place for news.
Well, I understand that completely. And it suggests that they've got to go back and hire all those misinformation people again. But I think at least the American public feeling is, yeah, but then what happens is they decide what we're not allowed to see, even though it may actually be correct. And the government comes calling and says, oh no, you can't talk about that stuff. I mean, where we still seem to be searching for a solution to how do we get to the truth without opening the doors to untruths. And especially with like deep fake, where it even looks true.
Right. I mean, there is technology to detect deep fakes. There is technology, even AI technology, not to mention human beings, to detect fake news and misinformation. We have seen these social media sites make an absolute choice for engagement over accuracy. And you can say, oh, the government might tell us what to do. That hasn't been proven. These sites, though, have proven that they make more money and get more advertising when their reputation for truth is stronger than their reputation for lies. We've seen that over and over again. Elon Musk has simply chosen the opposite of that. So the one thing that I really can't stand from him, and obviously a lot of people have seen a lot of faults in what he's doing, is for him to say, oh, I guess the advertisers don't like free speech. No, the advertisers don't like being linked to hate speech. There's a difference. And if you're not going to protect your users from hate speech, advertisers leave and your revenue drops, not to mention your reputation as a source for truth and accurate information. And we're just not getting that right now because engagement increases when there's anger and sometimes when there's misinformation. And it's just too bad because this could have been a really, really strong example of these social media sites being a way to get accurate information much faster than the traditional old media. Now you can't. You have to go to the old media. And again, as part of that, I respect that. I like it. It's great, whatever. But I'm a little disappointed right now in Silicon Valley's sort of claim that it wants free speech and it's doing it in the name of that versus accuracy. And I'm for accuracy first.
Well, I mean, I was struck the other day when the really horrible stuff started coming out about some of the massacres. I won't go into detail, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. And people were able to say, no, that's misinformation. That's all fake stuff on the news. We no longer trust anything we read on these sites. And it's an easy excuse to say, no, it didn't happen, even if it did, by the other side, who have their own interests. I mean, this seems to be a can of worms that I don't know how to reclose that can.
Right. And I think you put it well in saying there's a lack of trust in what you see, because these sites are really how young people get their news. And if they're simply known as untrustworthy, and if these young people are told over and over again, you can't trust what you are seeing when you scroll, they're going to grow up thinking, I just can't trust the news. And as someone who's been in broadcast news for a lot of years, people are always throwing at me, oh, we can't trust you. And I always say, why? And they make something up. And I know that no news source is pristine. I certainly wouldn't claim that. But 95% of what I'm told is fake news is not fake news. But online, on these social media sites, you really do have a good point. There's a lot of misinformation out there. The thing I pinned on my Twitter page, so the first thing you see whenever you're on my page, is how to shut down the automatic video play. Because like you say, some of this stuff is really gruesome and horrifying, and it may not even be true. Why subject yourself to it? If you want to scroll without seeing this, there are a few easy clicks to do, and so it won't autoplay the video. But that's what we have to do in this society, and it's really too bad.
Well, and there's it plays on human nature too. I mean, a lot of these game sites and even social networks were built based upon casino theory of how to keep people engaged and not leave. And I think these videos that get thrown up there appeal to the voyeuristic nature of human beings. We can't look away. We can't look away from the car crash. And they're taking advantage of that fact.
Right. And it's okay to say that it's hard to look away from some of these things. I would encourage people to learn about these things. But would you say that going on a social media site right now is a good way of learning about the conflict in the Middle East? I don't know. I'm sad to say that I don't think it's a good way to learn right now. I think you just have to be too discriminating. And what I tell people is find one or two sources you really know and trust and follow them, but try to, screen out the rest of the noise, because you just don't know what's true and what's not true.
Yeah, and the whole thing is about immediacy, and all the different channels and platforms and everything else, and trying to get out there first. And yet at the same time, the best advice is wait a few days. I mean, some of this stuff has been so horrific, and barbaric, you go, well, that can't have happened. That's not true. It sounds like a propaganda. And then you wait 3 days and it actually is true. And then you go, oh my God, what should my assumptions be going into this? And I think it's got to be, you got to wait a few days. You got to wait for multiple sources to confirm. I mean, that seems to me the only way to deal with this. We're in such a race for immediacy that it's costing us an awful lot.
Right. And it's not just that. The race for immediacy is a danger, absolutely, in our business. But the race to point out that one side is right versus the other just has led to so much inaccuracy. There's so much bias out there. And it's really unfortunate, because it keeps those who want to learn from learning, because you have to set aside so much of the misinformation that's proliferating super, super quickly. And that's too bad.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to switch gears completely. Taylor Swift. You got two daughters that are kind of in the Swiftian age.
Yes.
My sons are old enough now, and they grew up on rock and roll, and one's a record critic. They're pretty sophisticated, but Taylor Swift is a phenomenon for the ages, and her new video or tour movie has just come out. Had pre-sales of $100 million in tickets. And the CEO of, I just had to quote this because this is the technology angle. The CEO of IMAX, a guy named Richard Gelfand, told Yahoo, quote, "I don't think there's ever been a concert film like this before. It represents a landmark in the history of movies."
Well, why not? I mean, the Eras tour as a concert was really a landmark for concerts, not just
$1 billion tour. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in its scope, in its size, in its popularity. I mean, the fandom was huge. And, that's not even getting to the ticket prices and what people were willing to pay in the secondary market. So if you look at something that made that much money and that was that successful, why wouldn't the movie be at least that successful? I mean, I blanched at taking my teenage daughter when the show came to town, because 2 tickets would have cost $3,600. And those were not good seats. I mean, 2 tickets in the nosebleed would have cost $3,600. So if I can spend, $20 on tickets, another 20 on popcorn, and see it in an IMAX or something, I'm in.
You bet.
Many times.
You think, he says, we're not sure we'll ever see anything like this again. We probably will. I mean, comments like that tend to get, proven wrong over time, but it's hard to imagine anybody else could do this right now. There's no hip hop artist this big. Rock and roll's essentially dead. Maybe if the Beatles had a reunion and done this, but she seems to me to be unique.
Yeah,
and it's kind of lost on me because I'm literally an old record critic. For the Mercury News, I wrote hundreds of record reviews. Her appeal, I understand it, but it's a little bit lost on me.
Well, I mean, you're not the target audience, to put it bluntly, but even when you say record reviews, that's part of it. People aren't buying physical media like they used to. And so the idea of streaming a Taylor Swift album or a Beyonce album or an Ed Sheeran album, just to name three artists that came and just knocked it out of the park here in Silicon Valley at Levi's Stadium, and made a fortune doing it, is, you're whetting the appetite through technology and through convenience, and you don't have to buy physical media. And obviously a concert is going to cost more than what a record used to cost, or even a CD. But the idea is, we all see this music, we all know this music, and what's the next thing? It's to go see a concert. And frankly, I'm glad, as someone with kids their age, a little younger than your sons, they grew up from infancy with music a button push away. There was never any need for physical media. And it's not that I missed physical media. Sure, I bought some records to show them what it was like to have words on the inside, etc. But what I really wanted to do was to take them to concerts. And I've done that for years and years, to say music is not just something that's streamed through ones and zeros. There's something special about that connection. And it's an understatement to say that that connection was felt between Taylor Swift and her fans, between Beyonce and her fans. It's just an amazing connection. And frankly, I'm super happy that that connection is there, as someone who's always loved live music. And so the kids are all right. They're big music fans, and I don't know if they're saving their money or convincing their parents to buy the tickets, but they're seeing these music concerts live, and that's wonderful.
I mean, it seems like the great story of our century is scalability. That you can have a Facebook with a billion users or 3 billion users. You can see a Taylor Swift song downloaded. I mean, look at some of these numbers, 2 billion downloads. Now, that's gotta, it's, no kid can listen to a song 50 times,
Oh,
so that suggests though that you can be a global phenomenon. You can have 500 million people downloading your songs multiple times. That's never been before possible. And even Taylor Swift, as the machine she is, can't go out and do 700 performance dates around the world in the course of a year, and yet she can put out 4 or 5 videos that reach 10 billion people.
Right. And that's what makes this time so incredible. It's interesting. I was reading the book Daisy Jones and the Six, which takes you back to the 60s and the 70s, and how those artists, Crosby, Stills and Nash and all those guys, and they wouldn't put out all that much product, and yet they got really rich because they sold what they sold, and they brought in the money and the actual physical dollars, and then they would tour and they would sell shirts and all that. And it was fascinating to read about that time. And now, you mentioned hip hop artists know their stuff is downloaded and they're making pennies per download. So they have to tour, they have to sell merchandise. And I've talked to many artists, even here in the Bay Area, about that. And they say that is where the money is. And so they tour relentlessly and they work on the merchandise, but they have to whet the appetite by putting this stuff out there. And, you love to talk about the different uses of Moore's Law. If someone can download their favorite artist instantly, anytime, anywhere they are, they're going to be really, really into that music. And then, hey, the opportunity pops up because the artist is coming to your town. Bam, they're there. And that's sort of the paradigm how it is right now.
Yeah, and the quality of the production and the equipment you can put it through. You're not doing it on an old Silvertone record player from Sears. I mean, this thing, you got your world-class headphones now for $40. And on every device you own, and it's superb quality, like people would spend tens of thousands of dollars to put in their homes in the 1960s. I mean, it's a marvelous thing. I have some concerns about the quality of the music, not just in terms of dynamics and all of that, and production versus artists, but I have to admit, this is the golden age for having access to well-crafted creative music. And it's only going to get better thanks to Moore's Law.
Right. And just the convenience of having AirPods everywhere you go, and so much music on your phone, not only stored physically, taking up space, but that which streams through services like Spotify. I mean, it is amazing. And I remember as a kid, loving music and everything and thinking, what if I could be my own DJ 24 hours a day? And it wasn't long before, Apple did it and then Spotify did it.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's all right there anytime we want. And it's something we now take for granted. I'm curious what 30 years from now, young people will be able to do.
Yeah, it's interesting how far we've come in one generation from mixtapes to Spotify.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm really skipping around this week because the stories are very varied. The Financial Times has just published an editorial explaining why, in the author's opinion, Japan should sell Nintendo. The argument was that Xbox is becoming all powerful. Nintendo is not going to be able to keep up, and they should take the money and run. Is Nintendo in that bad a shape?
I would argue no.
I thought it was still one of the world's most valuable entertainment companies.
Yeah, you're talking about a company that made more than $3 billion so far this year, I believe, and it's still going strong. Granted, the titles are, the big titles tend to be Pokemon, Super Mario Brothers, Zelda, not exactly
greatest hits,
right? Yeah. Not exactly up to date, but it sells a lot of hardware. I don't know why you'd sell it. Again, it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise.
Yeah, because I'll tell you why you sell it, because Microsoft wants it.
Oh,
and
I see.
Microsoft gets it, if it can get past the Securities and Exchange Commission, because it seems to me that's literally buying up every important platform there is in the world. If that is a monopolistic, I don't know what, but Microsoft's got the dough right now. They could put a lot of money on the table in front of Nintendo.
Yeah, but I honestly cannot imagine that passing any sort of regulatory muster. Think about what Microsoft went through with Activision, and that's software. Nintendo, not only software, but it's a big hardware leader, like you said.
Yeah,
I can't imagine Microsoft getting anywhere trying to cut that deal. There's just no way.
Okay, well,
maybe I'll be proven wrong, but
maybe the Financial Times just trying to stir up some action, but it's kind of a crazy idea. Okay, Google's Pixel Fold phone has been billing itself as the thinnest foldable smartphone in the world, I think. And now OnePlus is about to introduce Open, which is thinner. And I'm not sure I've seen recently a single product announcement completely destroy the entire marketing campaign of a giant company. But now it's going to have to say the second thinnest. I'm not quite sure what the appeal is of ultra thin, foldable smartphones, but apparently it's quite the battle. And OnePlus Open is going to charge $1,700 for it. So if you thought the iPhone was bad, here you go.
And that's why I think we haven't seen many of these. I haven't seen many of these in the wild, and I do pay attention. The price is just so much more than either an iPhone or the comparable Samsung, certainly Google Pixel, great phones, and they come in way under that price for the regular just phone. And so I think it still feels a little gimmicky. I just haven't seen enough of them to know that that's a real category that is going to take off. The foldable phone. The screens are, I guess
not that much bigger, are they?
Right. No, it doesn't seem like they are. And it's cut in half. I just don't quite.
If it was like a Quattro phone where you flipped it open, then you flipped it again, and you had like a 6x6 inch screen. Okay.
That sounds like a term from back when you were reviewing records, the Quattro phone. I don't know. Yeah, I just haven't seen enough of them to make it feel like a hot consumer product. And 1,700 is asking a lot.
To be able to sit on your phone.
Well, right, exactly.
Okay. Interestingly, the Google trial with the FTC, it is, for years we've known about the deal between Google and Apple, right? That Google has to give a bunch of dough to Apple to be its default search engine. And but we've never known how much. Well, it's come out in the trial and discovery, and it apparently is $16 billion per year. Now, that's a chunk out of your profits, even when you're Google. And all the other companies, this Microsoft apparently came out, their lawyer in his testimony came up with that and talked about how it freezes the rest of the industry because you got the biggest, hardware company in the world hooked up with the biggest search engine company in the world, and they've got this sweetheart deal and no one can break it. It seems to me Google might want to try to break out of that mold. And I know they've been trying to develop their own search engine. I'm sorry, Apple's trying to develop their own search engine so that they can open things up a little bit. Is this thing going to last? Is this deal going to last forever? I mean, it's been years and years now, 20 years. Is this one of these things that nobody really thought about, and all of a sudden it's going to break and the whole field is going to be wide open?
I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. I'd like to see if companies like, I don't know, DuckDuckGo could make more headway. There's irony, certainly, in Microsoft saying, gosh, companies that are so big are keeping us small guys from getting access. Come on. How do you say that with a straight face in the Microsoft legal room? But also, Google spends a ton of money. This is a big chunk of Apple's profits every year. So I don't know that either side really wants to break it up. But if some regulators could get in there and break it up, things would get interesting because
it'd get real interesting.
Right. We'd really learn if Google deserves the incredibly high market share that it has, or, like you say, if it's got it because it's got this incredible tie-up with the biggest company, the biggest seller of phones and all that stuff, Apple. So I don't know, but, from a reporting standpoint, from a consumer standpoint, maybe it's time to shake things up. It would really be interesting to see what would come of that.
Well, with these Fed agencies on the warpath,
right,
after large tech companies, and now that this is out in the open, I could see some ambitious lawyer for the SEC or the FTC or one of them, or the Justice Department saying, let's do it.
Keep an eye on it. They're going to be under the microscope for some time, I think.
Okay, finally, and we're running out of time, but I wanted to mention that the FTX Sam Bankman-Fried trial, his girlfriend, Carolyn Ellison, completely threw him under the bus, and I think herself this week, by admitting that she had lied to the public, lied to investors about the money being funneled out of FTX into her Alameda Research banking for investment firm. And she said that Sam Bankman-Fried knew about it. But what I don't think that's a big surprise, but what I thought was interesting in the story was that she said he cultivated his image of being smart, her words, smart, competent, and somewhat eccentric, who dressed sloppily, didn't comb his hair, and drove a Toyota Corolla. So it was all an act. This is the legacy of those T-shirt tycoons like Steve Jobs in the late 70s, setting this standard that if you're going to be a hotshot young entrepreneur, you got to be kind of not in the mainstream and edgy and all of that kind of stuff. This guy, I mean, let's not use the word sociopath, though it may fit perfectly, just like we saw in the trial you covered, an individual consciously creating this sort of young, eccentric entrepreneur persona and making that a marketing tool. He said to her, he thought his hair had been very valuable. So, I mean, this seems to me telling, and it exposes a lot of people we've seen over the last few years, but it suggests that tech has become entertainment. that you have to go, it used to be just, don't notice me, I'm the CEO, I'm running the company, I'm wearing a suit, this is what I do. Now we have to have superstar CEOs and entrepreneurs who are dressing like the equivalent of big hair metal bands,
Well,
for the 2020s.
right. I mean, this says image is more important than results. And tech has never succeeded that way. It's tried many times through many generations. But the difference between Sam Bankman-Fried and Steve Jobs is one was an unqualified success and one was a failure who seemed like a success, but now we know it's only because he lied. And look, Jobs is gone. And what happens? He was a huge success. He went from shaggy guy with Birkenstocks to one of the richest people in the world. His legacy succeeds. But look, even Birkenstock went public this week, all right? Everything's about money. Let's not kid ourselves. And Sam Bankman-Fried was just trying to snow people, it seems.
Yeah, I worry, though, about the image over what you deliver, that the time between creates a lot of victims.
Yes, it does. And if you buy into something because of a hairstyle or a pair of cargo shorts instead of doing your research, you're going to get burned.
Yeah, even if you're a VC, apparently.
Yeah, goodness,
Yeah.
on a big scale if you're a VC, yeah.
Okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We'll see you next week. I'll be back in the Valley, and I'll see you too, Scott, in person. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.